Thanks everyone for coming tonight, or this evening, I suppose. By way of beginning, I want to say how pleased I am to see everyone here. I want to take a minute to tell you about me, a tiny bit about the center that has brought you here, and then make a few reflections on some of the changes underway and the realities of migrant trajectories in Canada. So my name is Jenna Hennebry, and I'm one of the co-founders of the International Migration Research Center here at Wilfrid Laurier University with my colleague, Dr. Margaret Walton-Roberts, who is here somewhere. I'm also a faculty member in the Balsillie School of International Affairs, and I've also had the great privilege of working with a team of excellent researchers and community partners, a group of researchers from York University working on a large project around migrant resilience in Canada, led by Dr. Valerie Preston. So we've been here today having quite an elaborate conversation about these issues. So this is the tail end of the day for a lot of people, so they're a tiny bit drained, myself included, as you can tell. And it's been a really fruitful day of discussion around some of the ways in which migrants and communities need to cope with change and challenge and stress, and how they do so. And so that's part of why we wanted to bring people here together tonight, was to discuss that with a little bit of a showcase of what's been happening in Kitchener-Waterloo. The reality is, or the title of tonight's discussion is Building Resilient Communities and Responding to the New Realities of Newcomer Trajectories in Canadian Cities. Nice and long, but really what it means is the way in which people are coming to Canada, settling in Canada, spending time in Canada, working, living, and belonging in Canada have substantively changed. And what's changed has been increasing different pathways, a whole variety of ways in which people now come into the country. And we have a system that's designed and predicated on earlier models in terms of responding to that. And there's been some major shifts over the last decade in terms of responding to those changes, but certainly in more recent decades, there's been more attention being drawn to the issues about how better to respond to this changing landscape. Because the truth is, the landscape, the policy landscape, and the reality of migration flows in Canada have significantly changed. We know that there's more temporary and two-step migration, which is now part of the kind of normal picture of Canadian migrant trajectories, and cities are now finding new ways of responding to these realities. We know that in a given year, there's more than 350,000 people in Canada with a temporary status, as students, as skilled workers, as caregivers, asylum seekers. In fact, we know between 2010 and 2013, Canada admitted 385,000 international students, or roughly 96,000 per year. Not only are there more people in Canada with temporary status, so that means that people didn't come with a permanent residency upon arrival. There's more people in Canada with that temporary status, and more people are staying longer than in previous years. And we know, for example, many want to stay much longer after that. And the tendency to stay longer has increased among the more recent arrivals. And what we see is increasing use of the temporary foreign worker program as the sort of first stage of which people arrive in Canada, work in Canada, and then apply from and get status in Canada. We know that sort of recent statistics tell us that between 40 and 50% of applicants for permanent residency have come from within Canada in a given year. We also know that not only are temporary foreign workers and those in other temporary statuses staying longer, many are trying to transition into permanent residency. And actually, this is not terribly surprising. We know that by the Canadian Bureau of International Education survey in 2018, for example, found that 68% of international students plan to apply for permanent residency, and 65% planned to stay to work after graduation. So all of this context at the Canadian level, we know translates down into the Kitchener-Waterloo level as well. We have 2 universities and a college, we have a highly skilled sector, we have an IT sector, and we have significant numbers of international students and highly skilled temporary migrants and migrants in a variety of different categories. We have at least 20,000 in a given year in that whole package of categories. And we have a choice. Cities such as Kitchener-Waterloo that are middle or sort of what we would call sort of second-tier cities are responding and finding a new path, and paths that are different maybe than in what is happening in some of the larger cities. We have a choice that comes from the flexibility and advantage of our size and our approach to our community. We have a choice whether to welcome these residents as part of the fabric of our community, whether or not they're here for 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, or eventually transition into permanent residency or not. We have also a choice to figure out how to cope with the new pathways and trajectories that migrants take to come and settle and become part of Canadian society. Because we can be resilient as a community, and we can, by our own resilience as a community, we are supporting the resilience of newcomers within our community. So tonight, I was hopeful that we would have a bit of a dialogue about some of these issues from some people that have been working very hard with community members as they respond to these types of changes. And these are only some of the types of changes. There's been some others that have obviously been widely publicized. For example, the resettlement of significant numbers of Syrian refugees in the community was a pretty significant moment. But these individuals that are up here today represent people that have worked and engaged with a whole range of community members. First, I'm going to turn it over to you to Tara Bedard, who is the chair of our local immigration partnership, to lead the panel discussion this evening. Followed by that, we'll have some questions from the audience, and then we'll be lucky enough to have closing remarks by my colleague from York University, Dr. Valerie Preston. So, Tara, go ahead.